So there are a lot of ants here, and I think one of them just bit me. But that's fine. I'm the invader here. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here in the beautiful outdoors. I am very happy to be talking about some Mexican authors because today we're in the month of September, and if you don't know, we celebrate our Independence Day in Mexico the 16th of September. It's not Cinco de Mayo, it's in September. And so every September I want to have this ongoing series where I talk about the Mexican authors that I read in the last year. So that's what we're gonna do today. I will link the video that I did last year, and we're just gonna start in no particular order. So some of these books, most of them I think there is an English translation, so that's great. So you can also enjoy them if you don't know Spanish. But for a couple of them, I'm not entirely sure. You might need to look into that. And the first one is actually one of them. So Enrique Serna's Fruta Verde. I'm not exactly sure if there's a translation for this one, but this is a story that follows three characters: Germán as our central character, and then Germán's colleague Mauro, and Germán's mother, and I forgot what, Paula. And this is a contemporary piece of fiction centered in Mexico City. And Germán is a teenager that is just starting university. He is just existing as a teenager. He's questioning his sexuality. He's wondering what he wants to do with his life. He wants to be an author, but he's also struggling to be financially independent from his family. And that is kind of his side of the story. And then Mauro is his gay colleague. He comes from a rural part of Mexico and is living more openly in Mexico City. So we get a bit of the queer perspective more from his side. And then Germán's mother, Paula, she is a very rigid woman who has grown with, very traditional values, and she has a very, very strong character. She has a great personality, but also she's very tough, both on what she believes, but also, So this is a very beautiful story. I really liked following all of the perspectives here. I think the one that I enjoyed maybe most was when Mauro and Germán were interacting, because Mauro is an older character. He might be like in his 30s, so we get a perspective from a queer man that is a bit older, and he's introducing Germán to kind of the queer world of Mexico City, and the parties that they attend to and just the conversations are very funny. Their relationship is not very healthy per se, but they are at the end of the day friends, and I think we get to see a complex friendship between a somewhat younger and older male characters. We also have bisexual representation, so that's really nice. And just to finish off, I want to say that Paula's character is also very interesting because she is a woman that, as I said, has these very fixed, rigid values, and she starts questioning them when she falls madly in love with one of Germán's friends. So she might be in her, late 40s, and this kid is like a teenager. So, this was a very, very fun book to read, honestly, like just following a bit like slice of life. Oh, son. That is Fruta Verde. So the next book is going to be La Cresta de León by Cristina Rivera Garcia. This is not the book that I was going to read by this author. I actually did a swap because I just felt more like reading this one. This is a book that is actually translated to English. It's called The Iliac Crest, I'm pretty sure. There's actually maybe a piece about this that maybe it was written first in English / in Spanish, or at the same time. I'm not exactly sure, but the author, she lives in the United States, I think. But she's from Mexico City. And this is unfortunately a book that I did not enjoy so much. I was super excited to read this because the premise, at least what comes in the back, sounds fascinating. Basically, the back describes the setup like this. You have two women that arrive unannounced at a guy's house. Like, they just like ring on his bell on this kind of rainy, dark night. So typical kind of horror setup. And these two women start interrogating the man, and through this conversation he starts questioning his own identity and even like sexuality. So it allegedly is a book that plays a lot questioning like gender and gender norms and gender roles, and that's everything that you get from the back and how people describe this book. And that sounded fascinating, and actually the start of the book is very intriguing, and there's a couple of like one liners that make the story very mysterious, and I don't want to spoil them because I love those like 2 or 3 moments where these women tell something to the male character. He's the narrator, and I was just like blown, wanting to continue reading, wanting to understand kind of what these questions meant. And yeah, like that was like crazy. But then, like, I don't know, I think the narrator, he leaves the house quite often because he has a job in this kind of health institute, and you get a lot of his own kind of pondering and internal monologue. And I thought that was kind of boring, and I just lost a bit of track of what was going on with him, and I just wanted to see more what was happening at home with these 2 women that are maybe I didn't say that, but they're just like staying there with him. One of them I think is a bit sick, and yeah, I don't even sure like why, but they're staying with him and they are not leaving. So I wanted to have that, more of that, especially with how the premise is discussed. I just thought this was going to be like the entire, because it's a very thin book, and I thought this was going to be like this conversation throughout the entire book, and it's way like slower. It's a bit more philosophical, a bit more, yeah, like flow of consciousness. I think this is one that might be really good to discuss, and I definitely want to read this again at some point because, yeah, people talk so highly about this, and it's a piece of queer literature and like gender studies that I would like to understand better. But yeah, I was looking more for kind of this thriller almost, like, yeah, like a gender questioning thriller ish. And instead, I think it's a much slower philosophical short novel. So just expectations. Um, then we're going to talk about Conjunto Vacío by Verónica Gerber Bisechi. This is an amazing book, and this is the other one. I think this is the other one that I'm not exactly sure if there's a translation for this, but it's quite popular, so maybe it will have a translation. I have talked about this book a bit in the past, so I will not dive so deeply into this, but basically this story follows a woman that just broke up with her partner, and she is kind of having this identity crisis, questioning like what she wants to do professionally, because she was also unemployed, so she wants to like start studying like trees and or the root, like the trunk of trees, and how by studying like the lines, like these rings in the trunk, in the, is it called a trunk, tree trunk, yeah, you can like learn about the trees and their age. And she's also an artist like the author herself, so she's kind of questioning what she wants to do with her life professionally but also personally. She's coming in and out of some relationships, like romantic relationships. And there's also another big component to this story around migration, because her mother, she is from Argentina, and they migrated to Mexico when she was a kid. And then her mother kind of just abandoned her and her brother, and she was kind of lost in her life. So there is this whole side of her story which deals with abandonment and this relationship with her mother that was absent throughout, I mean, partly through her childhood, but now like more strongly in her adult life. And so there's a lot of that. And the other thing that I always mention about this story that I think is fascinating is that the author herself, she's a visual artist, and she uses a lot of like, I don't know if you can see it. I will try to put some pictures maybe on the screen, but she uses a lot of like imagery in her book to describe how the woman is, like the main character is feeling, especially a lot of these kind of Venn diagrams to talk about like spaces and like relationships between people. You could obviously like she puts these annotations where each Venn diagram like might represent a person, and then like how those Venn diagrams intersect or separate from each other represent like lives touching and then like flowing apart. So I think visually this was a super beautiful book to explore. It's very short, and I think it resonates a lot with this wave of new adult coming of age stories where people in their 30s are finding these it's kind of being like a teenager in your 30s and you're rethinking your entire life and relationships and who you are. And I think it really captures that moment very well. So I think people like in their 20s and 30s who are in this situation will find a lot of connection with this character. And I thought it was a beautiful story and a very unique story, especially because of how these diagrams are used. Uh, I always mention this when I talk about this story, there is a sex scene that is also narrated through these diagrams, and that sounds very stupid and very nerdy, maybe, but it's actually beautiful. And I don't know, I thought that just blew my mind how this story challenges or experiments a lot with like storytelling and narration. So definitely a very unique, beautiful book. So this one I really liked. Now let's talk about Desierto Sonoro by Valeria Luiselli. This is actually an interesting one because it was originally written in English and then translated to Spanish. The author, she lives in the United States. I think she's the daughter of like a diplomat, so she lived around a lot of like places, and she I think is established now in New York City or in the United States somewhere. And then so she published this in English first, and then translated it herself alongside Daniel Saldaña Paris. So this is another one you can read in English. And this is a very interesting literary work that follows a family that is on the cusp of collapsing, and they are on this road trip together because of the jobs of the two parents. So the dad, he has a kid, like a son, and then the mother, she has a daughter, and then the parents got together. So the children are kind of siblings, but from different parents, if that makes sense. And the mother, both parents work with recording audio, and they use different like specific words for this. Maybe one is like a documentalist, and the other is like an audio something. There's like a specific word for that. But so they met through work, recording all of the languages that exist in New York City or something like that. So it's like this, they just like go around talking to people, recording them, and making these like audio libraries. That's how they met. And then they get together, they form this family, but after some years of being together, they are finding it hard to stay together. And I think part of that is like their personalities, but also what they want to do professionally, because she wants to focus on the migration crisis of kids specifically from Mexico to the United States, and how a lot of kids die in the desert because they are crossing on their own. This journey, right? And then there's the whole legal aspect of deportation and how some kids are just held almost captive in these legal systems where they are, being evaluated to see if they will be able to stay or not. And then the families that are waiting for them and don't know anything about them. So there's that side of the story. And then the father or the husband, he wants to document the last, like the last free tribe of indigenous people in the United States. I hope that it's the right term, but basically before the reserves were created, like this tribe of indigenous people that wanted to stay free, and it was, I'm not sure if it's historically accurate or not, but at least in the book it's narrated as the last tribe to surrender, basically, and move into these reserves. Anyways, so he wants to do that, and because of their professional interests, they are kind of being split apart. So they decide to embark on this journey from New York City to somewhere in Arizona or like in the south of Mexico to work on these projects. But also, it feels like the last trip before they eventually just break up or break apart as a family and just continue on their separate ways. Sorry, there's like a lot of stuff, but it's a quite complex novel. And the interesting thing is that the kids, I mean, they are part of this road trip. They're sitting on the back, listening to their parents talk about these two very different but somewhat related topics: migration of kids and indigenous people. And they just start kind of blending these two pieces of history because the kids are like 8 and 10 years old, I think. At the start of the story, I was like, the premise fascinated me. I think like just this literary piece on migration and independence and freedom and also audio, like it started great. Like I was really into it. It's narrated in a very vignette form, so each chapter is made up of basically like this paragraph that could be like 1 page long almost, and each of these is just a mother writing down her thoughts, and she's moving back and forth in time a lot. So it's totally in this extremely like vignette format. I think that took some time getting used to, and it really tells you that this is definitely about the journey and not the destination. So if you don't like these kind of non-linear narratives, this might be hard to get into. Um, and then because they're on their journey, I started feeling like the story was a bit repetitive. And I was about to DNF this book, actually, like about the halfway point. And then there is a big narrative shift. And I loved that. Like the moment I realized what was happening, like I basically finished a section of the book and I turned the page and I started reading. I was like, wait, I think we have someone else narrating the story now. And you get a very big narrative shift, and the story actually changes quite significantly. And I loved that decision. I think the story got so much better, and I don't want to spoil that, but I will say that this second narrating voice was so much more interesting to follow. Um, Both because I think there's a bit more that's happening with the plot, and I think that helped me personally, but also the relationship between that narrating voice and the people around them was just amazing. So I don't know, I really recommend this for people that want a like slow uh, piece of fiction around these topics that I've talked about. And definitely for people who have like the patience to have a very slow burn kind of meditative journey piece of literature. I really like this, especially towards the end. There are so many themes in this story because it's, I mean, just with the migration alone, there is so much you could talk about. And then, like, the father's journey, documenting this last tribe, there's so much that you can discuss with that. And then the family as a unit and how they're trying their hardest to like stay together, but you have this feeling that it's just not gonna work. And that kind of family dynamic is also quite complex. So there is so much to break apart and love about this. And because the kids are like taking pictures and the parents are like recording audios, I think for people that really like the process of storytelling and the act of narrating and preserving and documenting, I think this will touch them dearly in their hearts. And yeah, fascinating book. I think I've talked a lot about this. And now we're going to move to the last one that I don't have here because my friend Pablo is reading it. So reminder to finish that. But that is Temporada de Huracanes. And I know I've talked so much about this book already, but I love it. I love it. And this actually also exists in English, and it's called hurricane season by Fernanda Melchor. She is an author from Tabasco, I think, and she is kind of a journalist writer. Not kind of, she is. And she is interested, at least in this story, in narrating the dynamics in a community and how this community is broken in different ways by the discovery of a dead woman in the village. This woman is called the witch, and she is this character that lives in the periphery of society, and yet she interacts very personally and for very important reasons with different characters in the community. So in a way, she holds a lot of things together. And through the story, you follow 5, I think, different points of views, and you slowly discover more about this witch character, how she's connected to other people in the village. And obviously, it's a very hard story to read because it starts with a feminicide, and the story just gets tougher and tougher. This is a story about violence, about, as I said, like otherness and pushing people away. There's a lot of discrimination in all forms possible. Also a lot of violence, both physical and emotional and verbal, between adults and children, amongst children, in families. Like, it's a very, very hard book to read, but it's so interesting and it's so fascinating. So there are a lot of ants here, and I think one of them just bit me, but that's fine. I'm I'm the invader here. Sorry. So I will just maybe mention some of the things that I loved about this story, because I think it's one that you need to experience on your own. So the first thing that I loved is the narrative voice that Melchor uses to tell this story. Each of the characters speaks so differently and so, like, I don't know, it feels like it's someone, if you close your eyes, it feels like it's someone just telling you their life story. It sounds like how people speak in Mexico, and I love that because you really, really feel like immersed in this story. I at no point felt like there was an author kind of writing this story, but rather these characters felt so alive, and it comes through mostly how they speak and the words they use, the expressions they use. The book is written in almost this run-on style, so you basically have no like paragraphs inside of each chapter, and periods. It's a lot of like run-on sentences. So if you don't like that, definitely like this could be a struggle. But I just felt like all the characters came out of the page so strongly, and I loved that. The second thing that I really liked is that Melchor has like no kind of. I feel like she doesn't put any morality in this story. She doesn't put, like, she's not trying to preach anything. She's just trying to tell the story of these people that have been abandoned by society, by government, and even by each other, as it is, without any filters, without any kind of moral, like here's the moral of this story. Like, no, this is just life for, honestly, probably millions of people in Mexico. It just makes me feel so much empathy and compassion towards, like communities that have been just abandoned and are kind of left off to their own devices, and how that just doesn't work, and all the toxicity that stems from that, and all of that. So I don't know, that whole like raw portrayal of a Mexico that is true for a lot of Mexicans, I don't know, was very eye-opening to me, and very fascinating to read. And then the other thing that I really liked was how, like, just from narrative perspective, how you start piecing together information from the subsequent chapters. I thought like that was just like super cool to read, and I could not put down the story. Like, both because it's kind of told in this run-on style, but also because of kind of the mystery of who this witch person is, and like just the personalities. Like, it's so hard to stop reading this story. So it just like put me in this kind of spell, like it enchants you and you don't want to put it down. So yeah, what else is there to say? As I said, check like trigger warnings. There's a lot of like violence and assaults, and yeah, not an easy story, but uh, not an easy story to recommend, definitely, but one that I loved. And yeah, I will not stop talking about this story, even though it's so hard to recommend. One of my favorite reads of this year for sure, Temporada de Huracanes. I hope that I am not missing anything. Yeah, that is basically it. Let me know if you have any recommendations from books written by Mexican authors. I would love to get those. And yeah, if you read any of these books or you've read them, tell me what you thought about them. And thanks for listening, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.